we want to talk about something about focusing your learning, which is a really cool thing. I think that a lot of people, when you're learning to code, um, most people get confused. A lot of times when we talk to students coming in, Kevin, they are basically, hey, which stack should I learn? And they're learning like 5 things at once. And they get confused, and then they drop off, and then they quit. And what we want you to think about is like, hey, learn that one thing that you can do, And so I think that's real important. I think as you talk to students too, that they come in and they get confused by the enormity of software development and all the things that are out there. Yeah.
Oh, it's definitely confusing. If you're new to this, like I didn't have a lot of exposure to this a few years back, and I'm not a developer. I know front-end stuff, but I wouldn't call myself a developer. And coming into this, it's like, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of, you don't know how much there is until you start digging into it. And then you're like, there's a million paths to take, and you're like, which way do I go? I don't know what's a framework? I don't know how does a language relate to that? Can I just do it? Can I just do JavaScript? Like, is that enough? And where do I use it? How does that work? It's tough. It's the path isn't like, there's not one well-written path here. There's hundreds.
Yeah. And so what we want to do is like, what we think is the best thing to do is pick the thing that you want to build first. Okay. So like, pick web dev, desktop dev, cross mobile platform, something like that, data science. And then that's going to limit down the scope of things that you need to know to break in, and just stay on building web applications, or stay on building desktop applications, or stay on building mobile applications, or stay with data science, and don't vary from that. Start building projects with that while you're learning. I think that's it. And so once you say pick web dev, and this is what we do at Coder Foundry, once you say I'm going to build full stack web application development, that limits the amount of things that you need to learn to be able to do that. So it scales it down, and then you have a couple of people or 3 or 4 things that you can pick from. At Coder Foundry, we're at .NET, but yes, that can be React. It can be Spring Boot, something like that. There's a lot of things that you can pick, but once you pick that stack, just go into that all you can, as well as much as you can. And don't change it until you've built a portfolio of projects doing that. So
we see that a lot.
Yeah.
We see changing a lot, don't we? It's like, because there's a lot to learn, and you can go down that rabbit hole of like the greatest thing. You read a blog post about something, Rust or something somewhere, and it's like, man, I need to learn that now, but you haven't quite grasped the last thing you were learning.
Right. And so the thing is that all your learning should stay focused and don't kind of mess around.
Is logic design really useful for CS degree?
I think logic in general is useful for learning how to code. So I think and I think if I understand your question right, you're probably looking at algorithms. I think those things let you think through problems, and so you can solve problems in a creatively. And so I think it's very useful for a CS degree, but it's super useful for coding. At Coder Foundry, and what we're interested in is the act of writing code, building applications. That's what we teach. That's where the money's at. That's where the jobs are at. And so we don't want to teach you necessarily all of the things surrounding that. We want to teach you how to code so you can build a web application, a desktop application, or some kind of mobile app. But yeah, all that's very useful. So definitely, if you're learning that, go ahead and keep doing it.
Should I learn authentication from scratch or go with Microsoft default authentication code they provide in Visual Studio?
There's no question you should use the ones built in for using Auth built into Visual Studio. It's not really built into Studio, it's built into .NET. The other providers that you should look into are providers like Auth0 as well, and learn how to implement that as well. The reason is because I don't think you should roll your own authentication. This is well thought out from the Microsoft side. If you're into .NET, using Auth. And if you're not, then use a third-party provider for 2 reasons. The first reason is your Auth is to secure your application. So vendors like Auth0 has already thought through that. The same thing with authentication built into .NET. It's already been thought through. You don't have to figure out all of the side cases. Second, there is passwordless, username, password authentication. There's 2-factor. There's authentication with Google, YouTube, Facebook, GitHub, those kind of like third-party auths, and all that's built in there as well that you can do. And then with Auth0, there's all of these other kind of contactless auth providers, as well as things like single sign-on that you can really do really well through Auth0. So I think it behooves you to like pick someone that's already done that and don't make that the focus of your app.
Hey, if you're liking this video, please remember to subscribe and hit the like button and hit notifications to be made aware of all of our future great content.
Hey, just tell them to smash the like button.
And smash the like button.
So, Bobby, are you religious besides C#?
Oh, yeah. So like I'm not religious about coding in general. C# makes me money. So like I think that's where my consulting company's focused. And then when we were starting the Coder Foundry in 2014, we had to pick something to learn. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. Focus in on what you're knowing. And I already knew .NET and C#. It's very popular. So that's where we went with. But hey, if you're out there learning React or Java, Spring, or something else in mobile, that's fine too. I mean, all of those work. We just say pick one thing while you're learning. So what are you trying to learn right now?
Oh, damn, that's I want to play with Docker and I want to play with Google Run. Google Run seems really sick that you could just like containerize something and then bam, just ship it, make it serverless, and like as long as the application is stateless, like it's just free real estate. It's just It's so nice. And they also have an always free tier for that, so it's free infrastructure, and I love stuff that's free. That's pretty much all I love.
Okay, that's cool. So along with .NET Core, you can ship it in Docker as well, but that is like the big thing to know this year is in general Docker or containerization of your stuff, because you're right. You can just ship it out and it runs on cheap hosting or free hosting, and you don't have to worry about the infrastructure. It's kind of cool. Oh, so I haven't been able to find document create a default login through Auth0. Is this a paid plan or do you need to create a custom login UI? So it works two ways. One is you can use their hosted login page. And so that's the default way, Evan. And I will say this, keep looking. Their documentation is the absolute best on this. It is really good. You just basically type in your language and they kind of what you're trying to do, and there's documentation for it. But in general, that hosted login page does a couple of really cool things. I think if you're hosting something that could be popular or could have a lot of traffic, is they'll handle denial of service attacks for you. And so that means that your login page is not on your infrastructure, which is kind of cool. So when people attack your login page with called like reverse brute force, which is like they're trying to trigger a password reset, things like that, they'll instinctively slow it down and they'll detect that attack and they'll slow it down from like, hey, you can't do that in 2 minutes. Now you can't do it for 5. Now come back in 30. So it helps against those bots. And also it's on their infrastructure and not yours. It's just look at the paid plans for a lot of small sites. It doesn't really cost anything. But if you're doing like an enterprise level site, which is where Auth0 it really plays well in, it's going to cost a little bit for your customers. But you can also create your custom login UI as well and just call it from your page as well. You can do it both ways. But standing up Auth0 with their hosted page is real easy. And there's even customization there. You can drop a logo on it. It's those kind of things. But if you need a custom solution, you can do that as well.
Mike asking, would you recommend learning .NET over JavaScript frameworks like React?
Here's what I like. What I like when you're looking at JavaScript frameworks, I like Vue, because Vue is more lighter weight and you can choose how much of Vue you want to use. When you're using React, you're buying into the whole ecosphere. But I think that there's a case to be made where if you're learning .NET, you can go ahead out of the market and build a website application using vanilla JavaScript. But then you can use React as well on top of that. And I would learn that second. And then you can build something like Web API or serverless functions in .NET. And then if you want to use React, you can, and you can learn that too. I think ultimately, Mike, you're going to learn a lot of things, and you're going to do these apps different ways. But I think learning .NET right now will give you the best chance to break in. But if you do a job search and there's like 10,000 React jobs close to your house, learn React, put a portfolio together, build a project, and show it to somebody and get hired.
Yeah, that's one thing we talk about a lot, isn't it? It's like, because we do get asked that a lot, like, what should I learn? And we always talk about C# and .NET because that's popular where we are, and we think that is popular, period. But it's whatever, the real answer is whatever is going to get you a job where you are.
Yeah, right. And so we can't speak to every single city in America. I'm assuming you're in America. But if you're not, I can't speak overseas, definitely. But I do know that Microsoft being a global company, .NET is used everywhere, and it's not like it's going to be bad if you know how to build ASP.NET applications.
Question from Life. Wow, that's big.
Life.
I like the name.
Yeah.
Standard to use identity scaffolding or creating custom identity in the business world.
I think what you're asking is, should I use the built-in stuff in identity in Microsoft, and is that standard? Yes. People stand up those things all the time. It's just that when you have 8 or 10 sites in your portfolio and you want to unify all of those logins together so you can have one login, like a single sign-on, that's when it gets a little more complex. But yeah, I mean, like if you're building a single domain website, people use identity all the time. Just because it's easy to do doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It's well thought out, and Microsoft's trying to make it easy for you to do. You don't need to go write your own.
Yeah, it should feel like cheating, right? When it's done well, it should feel like cheating. That's not a bad thing.
And then what I would say is focus on the business end of what you're trying to build, and not the things on the outside, like identity. That's been handled for you. That's been done. Just focus on what the app needs to do.
I remember the first time that I saw scaffolding in general in the Visual Studio, and I was like, hold on a minute. You're telling me this does all this for me and I didn't have to create and do all this stuff? You have the push of a button?
Right.
It's like, yeah.
Like, we take credit for people say, did people really scaffold like, CRUD apps with this? I'm like, yeah, why would they write it when it just does it for you? Like,
right.
And it's not that you can't go back and change it. It's just that it means you don't have to type in a lot of things, and it just kind of generates some code for you. I mean, and granted, the scaffolding CRUD apps that come out of .NET are ugly. I mean, it's just like controls down in a single column down the page. You need to move them around and design them a little bit to make them look better. But it builds out the mechanism in MVC for you to talk to it.
Yeah, way better to start with than a blank piece of paper.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
something way better. I know you like this question. Thoughts on combining AWS/cloud with development?
I think that's where we're going. Period.
Big.
And I think, yeah, it's huge. So like the things that you can do with AWS and or Azure is no short of amazing, especially in the data science thing. I've been saying this a lot. Data science is going to get way easier to do. It's already in some use cases super easy to use with if you want to build like chat bots or voice bots, that's easy to do in Azure, and I'm sure that's easy to do in AWS. If you need to upload a large data set and run it through some stuff, that's easy to do in either one of these cloud platforms. And I think that's where it's at. And then you have things like serverless functions. So where you can just put a function out on AWS or Azure, and you don't have to worry about the infrastructure at all. And then containerization and Docker, which means that I can build my app locally, and then I containerize it and I just shove it up there, and then I don't worry about anything else. That's really cool. And I think these two companies, obviously Amazon, AWS, and Microsoft, are killing it in cloud. And I think they're going to be necessary skills for people to know, how do I get my stuff deployed there? How do I run it there? And what are the capabilities that I can do? So I think it's very important. I think I read somewhere, look at it. Yeah.
I think I read somewhere that Microsoft's biggest product was Azure. Like it's already topped the rest of its stuff is like where it's like, that's where it's at for the company, which is big for a big company like Microsoft.
Yeah, they're making tons of money on that, and they should. I mean, like it's very kind of complex up there, but I think that that's where you should be focusing. One of your learning journeys this year should be pushing something up on either one of the clouds, because now you'll see people hiring jobs. Hey, have you ever pushed anything to AWS before? Same thing with Azure. So
yeah, it's like you need to answer yes to that question, don't you? Really?
All right, cool.